Welcome, listener, in the shadows. We bring stories into the light. Join me as we explore the encounters no one speaks of and the things that watch from the dark. Inheriting the beast, I never should have gone back to the cabin. The place had been abandoned for decades, left to rot deep in the Pennsylvania woods where my grandfather had once lived as a recluse. I barely remembered him, just a dim impression of a wiry old man with eyes too sharp for his age and a voice that carried too far in the quiet. When I inherited the property after my father passed, I hadn't given it much thought. I let it sit, neglected and overgrown, until some vague sense of obligation pulled me back. I told myself it was curiosity, that I just wanted to see the place for myself, to decide if it was worth fixing up or selling off. But as I drove deeper into the woods, following the winding dirt road that led to the cabin, I felt something heavier settle in my chest. A weight, a quiet pressure, as if I were crossing an invisible threshold. The trees loomed taller here, the air thicker, the road narrowing until it felt like I was being funneled towards something inevitable. It wasn't until I stepped out of my car, stretching my stiff legs on the uneven ground, that I truly felt it. The silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the expectant kind, the kind that made my skin prickle. It was as though the forest was holding its breath, waiting to see what I would do. The cabin itself was smaller than I'd expected, its wooden frame bowed with age, the windows clouded with grime. The porch creaked beneath my weight, and as I pushed open the door, a stale, musty air rushed out to greet me. It smelled like dust and damp wood, but beneath that, something else lingered, something old and faintly metallic. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, just staring. There was something unsettling about being here alone. I had spent years pushing my grandfather into the farthest corners of my memory, never questioning why my father had spoken so little of him, why we had never visited. Now, being in his space, I realized how little I truly knew. The thought made my stomach tighten. The first night was cold. The wind crept through the cracks in the walls, carrying distant sounds that didn't belong. I sat by the old fireplace, reading through one of my grandfather's journals, the pages brittle beneath my fingers. The entries were erratic. Some were simple observations about the weather, while others were frantic, scrawled notes about watching eyes and the cycle returning. I didn't know what to make of it. As the fire died down, I curled up on the musty cot and tried to ignore the feeling that something outside was listening. By the second night, I noticed the woods felt different. During the day, they were merely quiet, but as the sun dipped below the horizon, an unnatural stillness took over. I walked the perimeter of the cabin, shining my flashlight into the trees, half expecting to see the glowing reflection of an animal's eyes. But there was nothing. No insects buzzing, no rustling leaves, just an oppressive silence that made my ears ring. I sat on the porch for a while, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination, but the longer I stayed out there, the stronger the feeling became that I was being watched. The third night brought the sounds. It started faint, like footsteps in the distance, but they grew bolder. Slow, heavy, circling the cabin. I sat up in bed, gripping the handle of the old hunting knife I'd found in a drawer. The sound would start for long minutes at a time before resuming, always moving, always closer. I didn't sleep that night. Every shadow seemed to stretch a little too long. Every creak of the cabin settling felt like a breath held just outside my door. On the fourth night, I smelled it. A rancid, almost metallic odor, thick like wet fur and stagnant blood. It came in waves, drifting through the gaps in the walls, filling my lungs with a sickly heat. I slept with a knife under my pillow, though I knew it wouldn't help. Whatever was out there wasn't just some predator lurking in the dark. It was something else, something old, something that had been waiting. By the fifth night, I was no longer alone. It left messages, not in words, not exactly, but in patterns. Gnawed bones arranged in careful spirals just outside the cabin door. Claw marks in sets of 3 raked across the wooden beams, always deeper than the night before. And once, just before dawn, I found handprints smeared on the glass of the front window. Human hands, elongated, the fingers too thin, the nails too long. I should have left then. I should have run, but something held me in place. A strange compulsion, as if I was meant to be there, as if I had always been meant to be there. I spent the hours before nightfall barricading the doors, pulling old furniture in front of them, even though I knew it was futile. Whatever was outside wasn't bound by doors and locks. I paced the small space, breathing hard, my pulse an erratic drumbeat in my ears. The sun set slowly, dragging out the inevitable. The final night I saw it. It didn't slink from the woods like some mindless beast. It walked. Upright, deliberate, its movements too smooth, too precise. Its form was monstrous, a hulking silhouette, more shadow than flesh, with a head too wolfish to be human and limbs too human to be a wolf. But it was its eyes that undid me. They weren't just yellow or glowing. They were familiar. It spoke. Not with words, not in any language I had ever known, but in a voice that resonated inside me, a whisper that felt like my own thoughts turning against me. It told me things I couldn't comprehend, truths that my mind rejected even as they took root. I saw flashes. My grandfather kneeling in the dirt, carving symbols into his own flesh, the forest swallowing his screams. I saw my father, his face drawn and pale, locking the cabin doors one last time before abandoning it forever. I saw myself, standing there, staring into those eyes, understanding too late that this wasn't an encounter. It was a homecoming. I didn't fight when it reached out, its clawed fingers brushing my arm. The touch burned, but not with heat. It was colder than death, colder than anything I had ever known. It didn't attack, didn't lunge or snarl. It only watched, waiting for something to settle inside me. And when it finally turned and melted back into the trees, I knew it would return. I left the next morning, but I didn't escape. Not really. The dreams started immediately, endless forests stretching beneath a blood-red moon, whispers in the wind calling my name. My reflection in the mirror seems wrong now. My eyes a shade too bright, my teeth too sharp. The hunger comes in waves, a gnawing thing that grows stronger with each passing night. I never should have gone back to the cabin, but I think, deep down, I always knew I would. You made it back for now, but the things in the dark never truly leave, do they? They watch, they wait, and perhaps they remember you now too. If you want to hear more, if you dare to listen again, step back into the shadows. Like the video. Subscribe, but know this, some doors once opened do not close so easily.